Hey everybody, Josh Runquist here for Heavy Debriefings, and it's already time to talk about what is my favorite year of music up to this point in this series, the top 10 albums of 2002. This is a seminal year for metal, this is a seminal year for music for me, and this is actually the last year of music that I'll be covering before I actually started checking out the music. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, it was 2003. 20 years ago now, when I started listening to music for myself. From 2002 onwards, it was always music that I heard on the radio, or I heard my parents play, or I heard my brother play, and occasionally other people. And up to 2002, the only band that I listened to for my own pleasure was Metallica. And of course, an album came out in 2003 that kind of tarnished my love of Metallica forever. Although I gotta thank them for that, because I was able to discover so much music to be able to get away from that album that they created. But more on that when we get to 2003. Let's talk about this amazing year with 10 phenomenal albums from 2002 that are still some of my favorites to this day. At number 10 is Symphony X with The Odyssey, what many consider to be the magnum opus of Symphony X, although an album that comes out several years later might defy that, but we'll see if we get to that point, shall we? But up until that album that comes out much later, The Odyssey was the album from Symphony X. It had everything that you could possibly want from the band. It's got the progressive power metal moments that you love, the symphonics that you love, Michael Romeo's amazing guitar ability, Russell Allen's magnificent voice. Everything that you could possibly want from the band is here in strides. It's got its best production, its best songwriting, and of course you have the 24-minute magnum opus of the title track, The Odyssey, which still stands out as one of their best albums ever, and one of their best songs to be able to have that title track attached to it. There's not really much else I can say about it. I mean, if you love progressive power metal and you haven't listened to Symphony X, you might as well start with The Odyssey, or that album that'll come out in a few years from 2002. But honestly, if you want what progressive power metal is all about, check out The Odyssey. Coming in at number 9 is In Flames with Reroute to Remain, or Reroute to Remain. I'm not going to judge you for how you pronounce that word. Yes, in 2002, a lot of people thought that In Flames lost all of its staying power. A lot of those same people said that back in 2000 when they created Clayman, so I already put up my thoughts about In Flames and Backwards Marathon just a few weeks back, and you can check that out to see how I truly feel about Reroute to Remain when it comes to their whole discography. But this really is, to me, one of the better albums of the second wave of In Flames. It's the right amount of electronics, the right amount of melodeath, the right amount of metalcore and alternative metal, all coming together to create some of the greatest choruses that they've ever put out, some of the greatest riffs that they've ever put out. It just felt like it was a great time for the band in 2002, and it's so great to see that it still holds up to a lot of people to this day. To a lot of people, this is the last good In Flames album, which I think you're wrong for, but this is a seminal album to In Flames, and whether you like it or not, it's one of their most successful, and I still love this album to this day. And if you want something with that melodeath, melodic death metal, metalcore, alternative, electronic sound, a lot of it got pioneered here in 2002 with Reroute to Remain. This is an influential album. You should listen to it yourself and understand why. Number 8 is the heaviest album in Opeth's discography, Deliverance. The heavy portion of their double release with Damnation, which came out in 2003, and spoiler, yeah, that's going to be in the 2003 list, how could it not be? Opeth's Deliverance is, again, the heaviest release they've ever done. Every song, with the exception of one song, really gets super duper heavy. Whether it's Wreath, whether it's the title track, By the Pain That I See in Others. I mean, there's not many tracks on this thing, but it is a heavy album. And A Fair Judgment is one of the first Opeth songs I ever heard in 2003. I heard that, and then I bought that album and Dream Theater's Train of Thought, which again, you'll be hearing about in the next part of the series, and all the stories that go along with that. But yes, with Steven Wilson, again, doing the production work on this album and Damnation, all those 3 albums with Steven Wilson were just so sweet, weren't they? I mean, this album pretty much goes on here for just the title track alone. It's one of the greatest songs ever written in metal, one of the greatest outros that's ever been written. It's just a perfect progressive death metal song. and I love it to death. How could you not? Michael Akerfeld and company just wrote one of the best progressive death metal albums ever made, and what else is there to say? It's deserving to be on this list. Number 7 is arguably the best album from Sentenced, although I am partial to the one that comes later. It is Sentenced, The Cold White Light. And this is the culmination of everything Sentenced was all about, at least for the second half of their career. The gothic metal, the hard rock, just a little bit darker, a little bit different than what they were doing before. Of course, they never reached the finished death metal that they used to do before. They became a completely different band over the years, and I love it for that. It's hard for me not to relate to this album when you got a song like Excuse Me While I Kill Myself, while very tongue-in-cheek, it's hard not to relate for someone like me with my head. But still, like, the lyrics are satirical, but also very poignant when it comes to mental health issues. The love aspects through here are dark and satirical. Sentence like Typo Negative is that perfect balance of gothic and tongue-in-cheek. And throughout any of their albums, they never accomplished that more than on The Cold White Light. And while, again, I probably am more partial to the album that comes after, and we'll get to that when that time comes, this is a perfect gothic metal album. And if you want some gothic metal from Finland that's not him, absolutely check out Sentenced. Coming in at number 6, I can already feel your anuses tightening up, it's Killswitch Engage with Alive or Just Breathing. And yes, it is that good of an album. Get the sticks out of your anuses, it's not good to have stuff up there for that long. Killswitch Engage is that perfect balance of metal and hardcore put together in perfect harmony. Great hardcore riffs, soaring choruses, great metal moments, and some of the best singing that you're going to hear in the genre, whether it's Jesse Leach on this particular album, Howard Jones on the 3 albums that come after, or Jesse Leach again after Howard left, and continuing on to this point. For what is truly the debut album from the band, I know there's the original self-titled that came out, but considering so many of those songs got rewritten, or re-released, or re-recorded, I consider that more of a glorified demo than I do a debut album. This I consider to be a debut album, even if it's wrong. I feel to be a seminal album and just an amazing first start for a band. Some of my favorite Killswitch songs are on this album. My Last Serenade is always going to be one of my favorite songs. Jesse just sounds perfect on this album, and then when he came back into the band, he only got stronger and stronger. Lyrical content is so relatable to me when it comes to mental health and personal struggles. I mean, how could it not? They just do it for me, and when I'm at some of my lowest points and I don't want to listen to funeral doom metal to purge that out of my system, I go to a band like Killswitch, I go to a band like Dredge, I go to a band like King's X, because those are the bands that at least I can put myself into a different spot almost all of the time. I can start to feel a little bit better, and especially when it comes to Killswitch, with the lyrical content being so poignant for stuff that I personally go through, it just helps. And whether you can listen to the band for that reason, or you just enjoy the music that they put out, or if you're just even curious to see what they actually sound like, give them a chance. Just because you were told not to like them 20 years ago, doesn't mean you can't actually give them a chance. Just do it. And in speaking of Dredge, they're in at number 5 with El Cielo, one of the most perfect dreamlike concept albums ever made. Dredge started off as like a post-hardcore / nu metal band. Then they wrote Leitmotif, and that started incorporating more of the progressive side. But I would even dare say that El Cielo is like the first true album of Dredge. They found their sound, they know what they wanted to be, they wanted to have these great progressive, almost art-like moments throughout the entire album, being able to get heavy when they need to, get poppy when they need to, get alternative rock when they want to. There's so many great moments that go on throughout, and whether it gets a little jazzy, a little poppy, a little rocky, all of it fits together so very, very well. And the production on this album is absolutely spectacular, I think due in part to the fact that this was recorded at Skywalker Ranch. And if you want some of the best sounds you can possibly make, you make your album at Skywalker Ranch, or your movie. Although I don't think they do that anymore. Don't quote me on that. Do not quote me on that. I don't know, I'm just guessing. But this album means so much to me. It is a concept album about lucid dreaming, and that feeling I'm forgetting the name of, when you're so fatigued in bed where you do have that lucid dreaming, but you also can't get out of your sleep. You're awake in your dream, but you can't get out. That's what this album is about, over more metaphors and more different ideas throughout, of course. Sleep paralysis. That's it, sleep paralysis. My apologies. Gavin has one of the best voices in rock. Mark has some of the greatest guitar riffs ever. Dino is one of my favorite rock drummers of all time. And of course, Drew has the bass lines that just keep everything afloat. This is such a great band. You're going to be seeing them at least 2 more times throughout this series. And I really hope they make a new album at some point. They were supposed to have a new album last year. That hasn't come out. And considering what their last album was, I can understand why they're taking so much time to be able to record a next album, because they want to do it right. But all I can say is, please come out with new music. I desperately need it. Coming in at number 4 is probably my favorite Porcupine Tree album, In Absentia. This is the beginning of the metal era of Porcupine Tree. Of course, that had to rub off with Steven working with Michael Lagerfeld so much. I remember in the Deliverance and Damnation Lamentations documentary, Steven Wilson was wearing a Calculating Infinity by the Dillinger Escape Plan shirt, so he knows his metal, and he incorporates it in just the right way on this album. And really in Porcupine Tree in general, it never gets too metal. It's always on the right amount of metal. Sometimes it's a little too proggy for some people, sometimes it's a little too poppy in this area. But In Absentia, yeah, done to perfection. Whether it gets acoustic, whether it gets near Opeth vibes, I mean, you hear that opening riff to Blackest Eyes? You try tell me that doesn't sound like an Opeth riff in the best way possible. Collapse Late into the Earth is on my funeral playlist. I can talk about that at some point if people want to hear about that. And of course, one of the biggest songs Porcupine Tree has ever done, The Sound of Music. Well, that's more if you're a musician, but it is such a great song. But I think overall the biggest song that Porcupine Tree has ever done is the song Trains. It's probably regarded as the best Porcupine Tree song ever written, and for good reason. It is. Every song on this album simply rules. And if you want to know what emotional fuckboy music is like if you are a progressive rock fan, you need to check out Porcupine Tree, and you need to check out In Absentia. It really is just that damn good. Coming in at number 4 is probably my favorite Porcupine Tree album, In Absentia. This is the beginning of the metal era of Porcupine Tree. Of course, that had to rub off with Steven working with Michael Lagerfeld so much. I remember in the Deliverance and Damnation Lamentations documentary, Steven Wilson was wearing a Calculating Infinity by the Dillinger Escape Plan shirt, so he knows his metal, and he incorporates it in just the right way on this album. And really in Porcupine Tree in general, it never gets too metal. It's always on the right amount of metal. Sometimes it's a little too proggy for some people, sometimes it's a little too poppy in this area. But In Absentia, yeah, done to perfection. Whether it gets acoustic, whether it gets near Opeth vibes, I mean, you hear that opening riff to Blackest Eyes? You try tell me that doesn't sound like an Opeth riff in the best way possible. Collapse Late into the Earth is on my funeral playlist. I can talk about that at some point if people want to hear about that. And of course, one of the biggest songs Porcupine Tree has ever done, The Sound of Music. Well, that's more if you're a musician, but it is such a great song. But I think overall the biggest song that Porcupine Tree has ever done is the song Trains. It's probably regarded as the best Porcupine Tree song ever written, and for good reason. It is. Every song on this album simply rules. And if you want to know what emotional fuckboy music is like if you are a progressive rock fan, you need to check out Porcupine Tree, and you need to check out In Absentia. It really is just that damn good. Coming in at number 3 is Pain of Salvation with Remedy Lane, one of my favorite concept albums of all time. While I've never been in a situation like Daniel Gildenlow talks about on this album, I do very much relate to it because I saw it through other people's eyes. I've seen so many failed relationships that get back together and fall apart. And for so many different reasons as well too, be it cheating, be it pregnancy, be it just falling out of love with each other. All of this is covered in this album, and more. And it's also done kind of in a Pulp Fiction kind of style where it's not a straight ahead story. It doesn't go from start to end in a cylindrical line. It goes all over the place. And it takes a while for everything to click and for everything to make sense, but it really does work out. Of course, the music on this album is absolutely incredible. The production is top-notch. There's a reason why this album is held in such high regard, along with The Perfect Element. It really is one of those albums that I think you do need to sit down with and try to understand until it clicks. But when it finally does click, when that slow burn finally pays off, it's extraordinary. And if you are a prog metal fan and you've never checked out Pain of Salvation, let alone Remedy Lane, you should, oh god, I can't believe I'm making this joke, remedy that situation immediately. Coming in at number 2 is probably the most underrated melodic death metal band of all time, because they should be regarded as the best melodic death metal band of all time, Soilwork, with their seminal album, Natural Born Chaos. Of course, when you have Devin Townsend helping out on this album, of course it's going to sound absolutely magnificent. But this is how you do 2000s melodeath done to perfection. The songs are so heavy, the choruses are so catchy. Speed has one of the best vocal abilities in all of music, let alone heavy music. This album is just what melodeath should strive to be, and so many bands tried to replicate this, but they could never duplicate it. They got close, but they never got that far. Soilwork did it perfect on this album, and figure number 5 as well, which of course we will be talking about. Soilwork just, I need to do a backwards marathon on them, and you can pretty much guarantee that that's going to happen at some point. It's that good. It deserves to be loved, and some consider this to be the best Soilwork album, some consider figure number 5. I'm gonna wait till the backwards marathon to give my details on one of my favorites, and we'll see where it goes from there. But seriously, if you want melodic death metal done perfectly, where it gets so heavy, so close to death metal, well, I mean, it does have death metal elements to it, but it also has some of the greatest pop sensibilities that you could ever find to make it so fun and so catchy to listen to. Listen to Soilwork. And why not start with Natural Born Chaos? It is a fantastic starting point for the genre and for the band. Coming in at number 1, of course, is Egglock with The Mantle. And funny enough, as I'm recording this, I got done recording my backwards marathon on Egglock, so why don't you go check that out on this very channel and see where it ranks amongst the other Egglock albums. It should be pretty obvious where it lands. But all of that said, this album does live up to all the hype that you've heard about it. It is just that good. It started so many imitators, it created a whole genre. It basically is one of the first black gaze albums, because it incorporates black metal, it has post metal, it has folk metal, it's atmospheric. It's got such a wide range of emotions. And while half of the album is pretty much just instrumental or have sound clips attached to it, the other songs have those great black metal vocals attached to it, or occasional clean vocals. The instrumentation on this album is spellbinding. The production is not too raw, but not too polished. It feels like a winter album, and as I look outside right now, it's funny, yesterday, almost all of the snow here melted away. Then we got another 8 inches of snow. That's Minnesota weather for you. And if that's not a great metaphor for The Mantle, I don't know what is. It's cold, it's dark, it's brooding, it's doomy, it's blackened, it's scary, it feels so good to the soul. There's everything you could say about this album, and all of it is right. Even if you don't like it, you have to respect it because of what it was able to accomplish, and it might have influenced a band that you care about. Yeah. This album is pure and utter perfection, and there's no other album that could have topped my personal top 10 albums of 2002. And there you go, folks, my top 10 albums of 2002. What do you think? Did you discover any new discoveries on this list? Do you agree with anything? Do you want to hate me for my own personal opinion? All of that and more, leave a comment down below. And of course, if you want to support Heavy Debriefings in any way, like, comment, share, subscribe, and continue to check out the videos that I do in this series and everything else that I do on the Heavy Debriefings channel. And until then, until the next top 10, interview, review, backwards marathon, or any other video that I do put up on the Heavy Debriefings YouTube channel, this is Josh Runquist saying, see ya.